Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am talking to stand-up comedian Dave Mowry. Dave is a stand-up comic who tells his story of living with severe mental illness, one joke at a time. He also teaches other people to tell their stories, and this helps them get through their dark times. So we're going to be talking to him about his story and everything that he's up to. And if you want to be a stand-up comedian, we'll also get his contact information to see how you can get in touch with him. So Dave, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Kurt, it's great to be with you.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Stand-up comedy and mental illness don't think they usually go together, but my story is I was successful in business, had everything going for me and for my family, and then one day I was stressed and anxiety. My mind was racing, and my mind just snapped. And due to my undiagnosed bipolar disorder, I ended up with 14 dark years and dark days. 14 years of dark days. I call them my lost years. I could barely move. I couldn't work. I was totally. I could barely get out of bed, and when I did, I could barely make it to the couch, and I was just totally broken. And then I found NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness here, local affiliate, and started going to their meetings, and one thing led to another, and they had a stand-up comedy class for people with a mental illness. And for some reason, I thought, hey, I can do that. And so I took the class, and turned out I can write jokes and got a sense of, what's laugh out loud funny, and get the ability to teach. And so, who knew, how this would turn out? I never thought this would happen, but yeah, I teach stand-up comedy to other folks with a mental illness. I perform on stage, telling my story one joke at a time, and that's where I'm at. And I listened to your podcast with Miroslav Petrovich about his speaking and all that kind of stuff, and he was talking about being true to yourself and that type of thing. And what I found was when I'm up on stage in front of a couple hundred people, and I'm telling my story, and it's my honest story, and it's the real me, I don't get nervous, and I don't get anxious, and I just get up there and do it, and it's fun. And so when people ask me to speak and they want to pay me to speak here or there, and I just can't do it for money. I just can't talk about other stuff. I can't do it for money. It's the wrong reasons. I just do what I do because it's honest, it's sincere. People with the mental illness, they really relate to it. People with family members, they relate to it. Help shatter the stigma about mental illness. And, me and my troupe and the folks, again, tell our stories just one joke at a time. I'm sure the structure of a joke, like a preface, the setup and a punchline. And the setup is, true or based in truth. And then the punchline is the creative part and the unexpected and what makes people laugh. And, the setup for all of us is based in, our truth, our experience with mental illness. And that's my story. That's what's happening. That's how I ended up getting on stage and doing stand-up comedy.
Well, you live with bipolar and anxiety. So how do you find humor when other people find pain who lives with these disorders?
There's the more challenges we have, the harder, the worse experiences we have, and the more material we have for humor, that's the best place to find humor. I think one of the things and a message for folks that I have is, you know, we can accept the fact that we have mental illness. I mean, I accept the fact that I have bipolar disorder and severe anxiety. I don't have them as much anymore, but I have panic attacks. I get triggered, PTSD, that type of thing. And but as long as we don't get stuck in that, we can accept the fact that I can accept the fact that I have bipolar and anxiety and panic attacks, but I'm not resigned to it. It's acceptance without resignation. So, I don't get stuck. We don't get stuck. The people I work with, when they come to class and they're starting to learn, they're kind of stuck in their depression or their bipolar or their, really hard times. And we just, we talk about it. We start looking for some humor in those experiences, and pretty soon we find that humor. And frankly, it just changes everything. It changes our lives from one of sadness and loss to one of humor and hope. And I've had people in the class who, like Molly, was a doctor, and she lost her medical license. She couldn't practice medicine because of her bipolar disorder, and she was suicidal. And she saw herself as a failed doctor, lost her life dream, and then after going through the class and performing and whatnot, she sees herself as a comic, and so she's got a different person. She's purpose. She sees herself in a totally different light, and so we don't get stuck where we are. There's humor. I mean, I've written 100 jokes for folks. I could, I read a suicide joke. I don't know if you want to hear it. I'm sure your audience would love it.
Yeah, go ahead and let us hear it.
Suicide. I mean, and I, was close to suicide. I sat on a bench with a gun in a park, and I was right there, but I didn't do it for whatever reason. I didn't do it. So I had my experience with suicide, and everybody I've worked with has had some kind of suicide ideation. So it's out there, but you don't talk about it. But so when things were really, this is the joke, when things were really bad, I decided to end it all. So I went upstairs to the bathroom and I took a bunch of pills. Afterwards, I called my wife for help. She said there are more pills under the sink.
Wow.
I know, really, And my wife loves a joke. And people, when I tell the joke on stage, people kind of pause for just a half a second. It's like, oh God, could I laugh at that or shouldn't I? And then everybody laughs. And the people that laugh the hardest are the people that have had mental health experiences or suicide ideation, and it's just a huge release. And
So what is the process like teaching people? Because you not only teach people with mental illness, you also teach the criminally insane. What is your teaching process like?
Yeah, I taught a class down at the Oregon State Hospital for people who were at the hospital. They were guilty except for insanity. So I taught down there, which was great. I mean, they were great people. It was great. The process is it's like a 10-week class. And people get together the first time and we introduce ourselves, and we kind of tell a little bit about ourselves. And it's almost like a group therapy, thing where you talk about yourselves and you talk about some personal stuff. And then the next week, do a little more of that. And then it becomes, we start looking for the humor, and people kind of get, they told part of their stories, so they are, authentic. And then people talk about, we just go around the room, people talk about some experiences, whether it be suicidal ideation or like again, Molly, she came up with a joke when she was going through medical school. Little did she know that Molly McNabb, ND, that the MD was going to stand for manic depressive. And that's just a little joke, but it's a huge, huge movement for her and her brain. So we just look for, We talk about our hardest experiences, and then we say, okay, where can we find the humor in that? And we find it. I'm able to say, okay, that's, there's humor there, or that's a good, I write down these things and these places, that's humor. That's great stuff for comedy. That's great stuff. So people don't know it's there, they don't understand it, but I can recognize it. And then once we recognize it, we start working with figuring out what a setup is, the honesty, the truth about it, and then get creative on the punchline. And off we go. And it's just a blast. I mean, to see people blossom, because for me, it was transformative in my life. My life was one sadness and loss, and it was awful. And then finding the humor in my life changed everything. It was transformative for me. And I see the same transformation happening with other people in the class. They go from their sadness, their loss, their all these resignation, all these things, and then they find some humor in it, and it just transforms their lives.
Yeah, tell us about your book. You have a book series, volume 1, 2, and 3. So tell us about that, and tell us where we can get them and what listeners can expect when they read it.
Well, I appreciate the question. The books are OMG, That's Me. And that comes from when I was writing my blog posts about what it's truly like, my experiences with mental illness. The most common response was, OMG, that's me, you're telling my story. So that's where the name of the book came from. Book 1, just OMG, that's me, is hey, it's my story, my experiences with mental illness. And if anybody wants to know what it's like to live with mental illness, or if they want somebody else to know, or they just want to relate, that's the book. OMG, That's Me 3 is about teaching the class, and about 5 people that have taken the class, and their story and their humor and the transformation that's happened in their lives. And what's cool, the audiobook is we've been able to cut in their jokes from their live performance. So it's not just you're listening to an audiobook and there's a narrator and they're talking about things, but at different spots, you get to hear the comics, you get to hear the comics telling their jokes, and you get to hear the audience laughing, and, you get to laugh along. So it's just not to, oversell or anything, but some people have said that, the paperback's good, but the audiobook is brilliant because you can hear these people and you can really relate to them, and you can really see who they are and how they've come so far.
Well, tell us if you could reach people out there that might be going through hardship right now, what would you say to them?
Boy, going back to my dark days and the hard times and then coming out of it, I would say, don't get stuck. Don't resign yourself to this is how it's always going to be. Things are bad right now, and no matter how dark it is and how bad it is, you come out the other side. And there's just light at the end of the thing. You come out the other side, and if you can just, at some point in your dark days and your hardships, look for a little bit of humor in what you're experiencing, that it just goes a long way. And the books, my books, especially OMG, that's 3 about the comedy. That's it's on Amazon, and the paperback, the ebook, and the audiobook are all on Amazon, and doing really well. So, that'd be, if you're going through a hard time, you're stuck, you're just in a bad spot. The audiobook, either one of my audio books, an audiobook, but especially OMG, That's Me 3, an audiobook, you'll end up seeing yourself in it, and you'll end up laughing about it, and you'll start looking for the humor in your own experiences.
Well, tell us about any other current or upcoming projects besides your books that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
Well, we've got a show coming up at Helium Comedy Club, and it won't be till February. So that's just a local thing here. I'm in Portland, Oregon, so that's just a local thing here. I'm working on another book about recovery. I run a small mental health nonprofit, and we're doing really good work. I work in a county for 600,000 people, and really focusing on the youth mental health crisis. So those are some of the things that I'm doing. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, I always answer, I always respond. But I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn, and if you want to get to me, if you just want to say something, if you want to talk, if you got a question, if you're in a bad spot, and anything, I'm happy to support you, to talk to you, to refer you to somebody, or do whatever. And oftentimes, just having somebody to talk to, or talking to somebody who's been there, who's experienced it, who's had those dark days, talking to them without judgment, and and it just makes a huge difference in someone's life. I know it. I know it did for me. So that's kind of, I found my purpose and kind of doing that with other people too.
Okay,
But
well, you just gave out your contact info.
I did, didn't I? Do well. I've been listening to your podcast, so I almost knew that was the next question.
Absolutely. Well, you know what the next question is? Close us
Yeah,
out with some final thoughts. If there was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or just any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
I think that I think I would like to finish up with a joke, and it's about mental health and me taking meds. And one of the meds that I take is notorious for weight gain, and true to form, when I was taking it, I gained 30 pounds. And so I decided to join a club. And when I joined the club, I started doing the treadmill. And it didn't take very long to realize the treadmill was the perfect exercise for someone with a mental illness, because you do the same thing over and over and over again, and you never get anywhere. And then the other day, I was on the treadmill, and the guy next to me looked over and he said, "You're not going very fast." I said, "That's okay. My mind's racing."
Another classic.
So
Another.
I'll leave that with you and your audience. And I just want to say, hey, thank you for having me on, and being able to share this message. You're good at what you do, and I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I appreciate everything you do. And listeners, I would appreciate it if you follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Contact Dave if you need to. Get on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. Check out the show, share it. If you have any guest or suggestion topics, Curtis Jackson 1978 at att.net is the place to send them. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. Dave, again, thank you for all that you do, and it's a pleasure having you on.
Really appreciate it.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.